Welcome to the land far away. Let me first give you a brief explanation. This video was intended as a retrospective of the Star Wars Droids cartoon from 1985. I was too young to watch it at the time, but I finally decided to give it a go now. However, as I watched the show, I realized there wasn't enough meat here for the kind of video I had in mind. I mean, Droids is an animation for single-digit kids. It's fun, imaginative, goofy at times. It has good animation, nice stories, proper morals, and even few genuinely touching moments. Its heart is in the right place, but unless you're watching it with your little one, which I plan to do, you probably won't find much to captivate you as an adult. I'm not rehashing the old, tired argument that Star Wars is for kids, so criticism should be off limits. No, what I'm saying is that content made for 6-year-olds is vastly different from content made for 12-year-olds, which is the audience Star Wars was allegedly intended for. This doesn't mean it can be shit. Kids deserve quality writing too. What it does mean, however, is that in such cases, simplification in storytelling and the use of so-called cartoon logic are often conscious creative choices, not signs of a lack of talent on the screenwriter's part. Of course, there are exceptions. Positive ones, too. One of my favorite cartoons, Avatar: The Last Airbender, was deemed suitable for children aged 7 and up, yet it has plenty to offer adult viewers as well. Droids does not. Unless you're a hardcore Star Wars fan like me. In that case, you might find yourself scratching your head at just how many small elements from this show resurfaced in later Star Wars content, making droids surprisingly influential. Not necessarily on a lore level. You know, the way Dave Filoni inserts Ahsoka into everything, artificially elevating her importance in the canon. No, rather on a meta level. At times, Droids feels like a blueprint, as it introduced a surprising number of ideas that were later reused rather than directly referenced. Coincidence or not, here's what I found.
I understand that Kybo Ren now lies in your dungeon.
The villain of the show's second arc is a pirate named Kybo Ren. He doesn't have much in common with Adam Driver's character from the sequel trilogy, but it's amusingly distracting to hear him say his own name over and over again.
No one tricks Kybo Ren. Huh? Ha ha! No one sneaks up on Kybo Ren. Ha 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 ha! Come to Kybo.
I strongly doubt Kylo Ren was an intentional reference to this character, but the similarity is just puzzling.
Work! Something, anything, work!
Who are you? Mungo Baobab, from Manda.
Speaking of recurring names, the final master of 3PO and Artoo in the series is Mungo Baobab from the planet Manda. Mango. Manda. Mando. Once again, I doubt the Mandalorian was referencing this, but it's a fun coincidence. Also, as a linguist, I appreciate that someone, somewhere, heard the word Baobab, the name of an African tree, apparently liked the way it sounded, and decided to name a character after it. I'm some kind of a lover of words myself.
According to this hologram, it is hidden in a dust cloud called the Cloak of Sith.
It's also worth noting that the show introduces a location named after the Sith. While the term Sith appeared in George Lucas's original script for Star Wars, it wasn't actually spoken in a film until The Phantom Menace.
My only conclusion can be that it was a Sith Lord.
Unless you count the deleted scenes.
This Sith Lord, sent by the Emperor, will be our undoing.
The lore surrounding the Sith took decades to fully develop. Timothy Zahn allegedly intended for the Noghri to be the original Sith species, which would provide some context for Vader's title of the Dark Lord of the Sith. Anyway, back to droids. For historical reasons, it's cool that this is the first time we ever hear the Sith mentioned, and from a world-building perspective, it's a nice touch to see a location in the galaxy named after them, especially in a cartoon released just a few years after Return of the Jedi.
Welcome to the Buy 2 Droid Harem.
To wrap up the topic of words and names, here's something entirely different. At one point in the show, we're introduced to a droid harem. There's no funny business going on, no robosexual activities, at least we don't see any. But it's still baffling that someone decided to call it that. Why not just go with Droid Spa, since that's essentially what it is? You've got to love old cartoons for such weird creative choices. Speaking of weird choices, the twin comet. I get that harems weren't historically just about sex, but in Western depictions, they've often been reduced to exactly that. It's hard to imagine one of the writers was trying to reclaim or decolonize the term to educate viewers about Muslim culture. That's giving them way too much credit. But anyway, let's move on. The world of droids is set across various imaginative planets, populated by all kinds of people, aliens, and machines. Some of them are downright goofy, like the bird people, the frogman in a beret, or the Jewish droid comedian who looks like George Bluth in a prison outfit. And let's not forget this wild, incredibly 80s mullet. It puts the kid from Terminator 2 to shame. On the other hand, some of the designs are so cool that they reappeared in later Star Wars movies. For instance, this droid kinda resembles K2SO from Rogue One. Another looks to me like an early version of the Trade Federation's battle droid. And this vehicle? It's strikingly similar to the one General Grievous uses in Revenge of the Sith. What can I say? Back in the day, the people behind Star Wars had a real knack for creating cool and memorable designs. By the way, you know what I did when I saw the original Star Wars for the first time at the age of 6? I grabbed a sheet of paper and some crayons and started drawing TIE fighters, X-Wings, lightsabers, and stormtroopers. Even though I can't draw, still, that movie was such a boost of creativity that I felt the need to do something artistic. Just like that. Speaking of interesting designs, the show features plenty of bizarre weapons. While there are lots of lasers being shot, you won't find a traditional-looking gun in the entire series. Instead, characters use all sorts of shooting staffs, and the closest thing to a gun is a seed planter. There's a single appearance of a lightsaber, but it's used as a tool, not a weapon. Not unlike in The Phantom Menace. What really caught my attention, though, was the light whip. I remember reading about it in the Darth Bane trilogy, where Githany wields it. While I thought the weapon seemed stupid, I did enjoy the explanation that a singular, single-bladed lightsaber is actually superior to all kinds of sabers because it offers greater flexibility. The light whip's strength lies in catching opponents off guard, as most people wouldn't know how to counter it. The light whip made a brief appearance in The Acolyte, but it's visually represented here for the first time ever, I believe, which is a statement you won't find on Wikipedia.
This is Boonta.
Let's shift gears. Before The Acolyte claimed the word Boonta, Boonta Eve was the largest annual pod race in the galaxy and cultural event on Tatooine. While the event was first mentioned in The Phantom Menace, the first masters that 3PO and Artoo encounter in Droids are racers who dream of attending the Boonta race.
You told me to figure out a way to get us and the White Witch to the Boonta speeder race, didn't you?
Eventually they do. The race looks like a Hot Wheels set, by the way. Sure, it's technically a different racing event, but it shares the same name, so I doubt it's a coincidence. Oh, and I know that Boonta the plant is spelled with a U, while Boonta Eve is spelled with a double O. This is what we call a homophone in linguistics. Words that sound the same but are spelled differently and have different meanings. The term usually applies within a single language, but its meaning is broader than that. We see such cases all the time in the real world, so it's believable that homophones would exist in the Star Wars galaxy as well. However, I suspect that other forces were at play here, either ignorance or a deliberate attempt to stir up the already divided fandom. Fishing for controversy, so to speak. Just like randomly making Ki-Adi-Mundi alive when he wasn't, and then joking that fanboys were upset because of a character's birthday. Anyway, speaking of fandom divided, here's a tasty treat. I've always enjoyed the Detective Obi-Wan subplot in Attack of the Clones, but I know many fans disliked seeing a 1950s-style American diner in Star Wars. Oddly enough, the second story arc of Droids features 3PO and Artoo working in an almost identical setting. It even has a four-handed guy running the joint, although he's more humanoid in appearance than Dexter Jetster. Coincidence? I don't think so. Let's hang on the topic of Artoo for a moment longer. For obvious reasons, in prequels and then in Clone Wars, he is depicted as a much more capable character than in the original trilogy. While it can feel a bit over the top at times, and I'm not that fond of this presentation, it makes sense that, as an astromech, he would have a wide array of tools at his disposal. He essentially has a built-in Batman's utility belt. The seeds of this concept can be seen already in Droids. Here, Artoo uses a grappling hook, a fire extinguisher, and all kinds of blades. Like it or not, it all starts here. Let's finish up this category by addressing the sequel trilogy. I'm sure you remember the memeable salt planet of Crate from The Last Jedi. Meanwhile, in Droids, Episode 1 of the show opens with R2 and 3PO landing in a salt desert, only to find themselves needing rescue from an impending salt storm. It might feel like a bit too obvious nod to both Tatooine and Hoth at the same time, but I actually like the concept. A desert isn't inherently deadly to droids, but salt can be, as it causes metal to corrode. I would argue, a salt storm is far more threatening to them than a sandstorm, and that's a nice little world-building touch if you ask me. Now let's go to a recycled plot. Episode 13, written by the great Paul Dini of Batman the Animated Series fame, and based on a story by the legendary Ben Burt, features a somewhat recognizable story. In this episode, the villain of the final arc, Governor Kung, uses a deadly germ as bioweapon. Mungo Baobab and the droids must race to find a cure, to save his love interest's mother. This storyline is strikingly similar to the virus arc in Season 1 of the Clone Wars, where a mad scientist working for the Separatists plans to unleash the deadly Blue Shadow virus. When Padme and Ahsoka are infected, Anakin and Obi-Wan have just 48 hours to locate an antidote and save them before it's too late. However, aside from this inciting incident, these episodes have little else in common. Finally, one just for myself. One that doesn't fit into any other category. As a kid, I absolutely loved playing Star Wars Rebellion. I still have the game on my PC, along with a few other 90s classics, so it was fun seeing Admiral Screed in Droids. He actually originated in the show and went on to be one of the cooler-looking characters in that game. That said, in Droids, he's just another mustache-twirling villain without much substance, like all of them. As I mentioned, the show is quite childishly simplistic. For now, that's it from me. Thanks for indulging me in another one of my random Star Wars excursions. As I mentioned, I've been a fan for over 30 years. That's a lifelong love, no matter the state of the franchise. After all, if you're not enjoying the current Star Wars output, there are decades of content to revisit or delve into for the first time. That's how I personally cope. Anyway, what did I miss? Did you watch Star Wars Droids yourself? Let me know in the comments section. Also consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Until next time, bye.